So joining us on this sporting planet is broadcaster Suhail Chandhok. And Suhail, great to see you once more. Part of the team as well, which is lovely. Champions Trophy, let's talk about that then. It's back for the first time since 2017. It was thought that it might never come back after the ICC cancelled it. Been on a little bit of a roller coaster, perhaps it's fair to say. Why has it been brought back?
Firstly, good to be back, Natalie, and yeah, good to be part of the family. I think it's going to be a fun, few months ahead as well as we churn out some great content from around the world in the world of sport. But yeah, just coming to the Champions Trophy, I actually really like the ICC Champions Trophy. I've always been a fan of it. I'm one of those, I guess, old school nuffies that like one day cricket. I think there's kind of a balance of all forms of cricket in it. You've got the slam bam part of it through the first bit and the last bit. I think the evolution of ODI cricket has actually been quite fantastic, given the rise of T20 cricket and given the innovation in terms of shot making. So actually, I'm glad that the tournament's back. The fact that it's back in Pakistan is another huge story, of course, in itself. Pakistan hosting an ICC tournament for the first time since 1996, if I'm not wrong, and that's huge for the nation itself. But I think just on the format coming back, look, I think you either have to kill ODI cricket altogether, or you've got to help sustain it with an ICC Champions Trophy, etc., etc. If you're still playing bilateral series, if you've still got an ICC ODI World Cup, then I think the Champions Trophy has a place. And I think I'm glad, therefore, that it's been revived because if you've got the World Cup there, and I think we saw the last World Cup and why it was so special in the ODI format, it's still got legs. So as long as it still has legs, and maybe there's a reduced number of ODIs that are played through the year, but I think an ICC tournament of this stature, it's good to have it back.
Mm. I was going to ask them because the ODI format, the 50 over format, is it going through a demise, do you think? And that's why it's so important to have something like the Champions Trophy back, because otherwise, in terms of an international tournament, we only have the World Cup.
It is going through a demise. I think let's be honest. That is the short and dry of it. It is definitely going through a demise. I see a time where maybe franchise cricket takes on the chunk of the year, as football has it as well. You've then got international fixtures where you've got a break in between, and that's kind of where an ICC tournament fits in. And all your franchises will stop playing at that point. You'll have an international break, a few international friendlies. Now, whether that's only going to be Test cricket and T20 cricket or ODI cricket, I don't know. I think the scapegoat is going to be ODI cricket. It's kind of the easiest to kill. And now, having been on the broadcast side of things, what it's like for a camera person, for a producer, for a director, for a commentator. An ODI cricket match is a bit of a drag. It's a much longer format. It takes a lot out of people as well, and I think there's a lot of implications from an attention standpoint as well. I think attention spans are getting shorter and shorter in the world today. People want a result quicker, and you can understand, I guess, therefore, why the lure of ODI cricket is shorter and sort of diminishing a lot, while Test cricket still has, just that battle over 5 days, or let's be honest, 3.5 days from for the last few years that we've gotten to know it. But there's a charm about Test cricket, and I think that'll always sort of be the epitome of a top cricketer. But I think the scapegoat is always going to be ODI cricket.
Well, you mentioned charm then. What about the countries? How charmed are they by the Champions Trophy? Those that are participating in it, how much do they prioritise and care about it?
Well, if you go by Australia, they've sent half their team and the rest are sitting back home. So you can't quite go by that, I think. But I do think there's a lot of importance given to it. When you look at just the pure recognition of an ODI ICC event, I think it's always recognized very, very highly. When you speak of a World Cup win, it's still always an ODI Cricket World Cup that's taken seriously over a T20 World Cup. I know it's changing, but there's still the seriousness that an ODI World Cup or an ICC ODI event holds over a T20 event. And even though T20 cricket's now been around for such a long time, the IPL's been around for such a long time, the 100 has had this massive injection of valuations and money come in, I still think there's a seriousness behind ODI cricket that can't be removed. So I think teams are taking it seriously, just given the squads that have been sent across to Dubai and Pakistan. There's a lot that's gone on behind it. There's a lot of thought that's gone on behind it as well. From an Indian standpoint, it is the best squad that you could possibly see. Unfortunately, no Jasprit Bumrah, but apart from that, it is a proper unit. So barring Australia for whatever reasons those might be. I think everyone's really, really pushed at this one.
Yeah. With the World Cup, that lasts what, just around 2 months, something like this. Whereas this tournament condensed into 2.5 weeks. It's, I think, what, 5 games you have to play if you're going to go on and win it. It's a tournament that leaves very little for error, Sahel.
It is, and that's kind of what I like about it. One game, one bad game, you're out pretty much. And I think we've seen that, unfortunately, for you guys in England. Australia turned up with half a squad and still beat an English side that's kind of been patchy. And, everyone writes Australia off before an ICC event, but then we forget that at an ICC event, Australia just somehow find a way to turn up. It's one of those things about Aussie cricket that just is so hard to explain. And I actually caught up with Shane Watson here a couple of days ago, and I asked him, and he said, "Look, I think there's something that mentally just switches on within us as Aussies, and they have this sort of switch that goes off when an ICC big ticket event turns up, where they know how to sort of hit that next gear mentally, and it's almost as if they feed off that pressure as well. I mean, chasing in excess of 300 was an unbelievable chase for what was pretty much a half baked Aussie squad, especially in terms of the bowling. So yeah, kudos to them. And it is an unforgiving format. Pakistan as hosts know that now, and I think they've had a couple of shocking results. So they're pretty much out of contention at home, and that to me is the saddest tale of them all in some sense.
Yeah, you're right with Pakistan. It's pretty much they're out, aren't they? They've lost their games in this competition so far. In terms of their hopes, what do you think they would have hoped to have achieved to at least get out the group stage?
Yeah, I think realistically, I think that would have been the hope. But I think you're always looking at that New Zealand and India combination. And let's not forget, New Zealand just blanked India in a test series at home. They went on to have a great run in the Middle East and Pakistan since then as well. So, for me, New Zealand are actually the dark horses to go out and win this overall. I think they're very good players of spin. You look at that batting lineup up and down the order, whether it's Rachin, whether it's a Daryl Mitchell, whether it's a Kane Williamson. I think they've just got the wherewithal with their batting, with their bowling unit. Tom Latham in the mix as well. You've got so many others like a Will Young, which will suddenly turn up and provide a match-winning innings. So I think you've got guys who can contribute with both bat and ball. Glenn Phillips will take a screamer on the field and change the course of a game as well. So I think for me, New Zealand, while they're normally just that semi-final, consistent side, they're actually for me a proper dark horse. And I said this a couple of weeks ago to a few others as well, saying for me, New Zealand, India, Australia, and South Africa are my four favorites. I actually said Australia to me may not be, and I actually had Afghanistan in the mix as a dark horse. But Australia again have turned up and somehow got the job done in a big game.
Before we talk more in detail then about the tournament, tell us, you mentioned about Pakistan hosting an ICC tournament for, what's it, nearly 3 decades, the first time they've done that. How important is it for Pakistan then to be hosting a world event like this?
I think it's massive. I've got friends of mine that studied with me in university in Australia that are in Pakistan now, and other cricketers that are in Pakistan that talk about the stature of this tournament. I don't mean stature from the tournament itself or the infrastructure and all of that jazz that came together last minute, but just the implication on tourism, just the implication on just the outward sort of look into Pakistan, right? I think the safety issues, commercials, all of this, the entire implication on Pakistan is so different from the outside world in. And I think when you pull off a tournament like this, where there's no issues on safety, and hopefully there won't be going forward, when the entire tournament is run in a smooth manner. Hopefully, the takeaway from this is that Pakistan can host cricket again. At the end of the day, people love watching cricket there. When you saw Glenn Maxwell, hit those winning runs off Jofra Archer, you had 35,000 people screaming. And I think that's what you want to see in the subcontinent. You get that flavor of love for sport and for cricket in Pakistan. So, you think back to India's last series there, and I remember Lakshmipati Balaji and that entire touring party becoming icons in a different nation. And there's so many implications of a good tournament for Pakistan, on the democracy, on the politics of it, on the commercialization of sport again, on the revival of sport in many ways, to be able to host cricketing bilaterals or other tournaments yet again. So I think the implications are far greater than what any of us could ever imagine, because there's been such a cloud over Pakistan, and unfortunately, for some reason, they can't shy away from it, and that's why I think obviously tensions remain between India and Pakistan, and India doesn't play there. But I think this will help. Right, it's a step in the correct direction. It's a step towards hopefully, maybe India touring there in some point in the future. But I think there has to be more conviction for touring parties, for players to feel safe about it, and it only goes, with every tournament that's run successfully to build that confidence for a player, for an administrator, for everyone concerned.
Yeah, absolutely right. You mentioned India obviously not playing in Pakistan. They're playing in a neutral venue in the UAE. Just for those that aren't quite aware of why, you sort of touched on it briefly. What is the reason as to why India don't play in Pakistan?
Look, I think it's a very, very deep-rooted problem, right? I think it goes beyond my understanding and your understanding, or any normal human being's understanding here. There is obviously a lot of political tension, and there's a lot of depth to that as well that goes generations. And I think there's a lot that's attempted to be resolved in the past, that's been resolved and then come back in many ways. And so there's always this sort of air of uncertainty and tension. And I think it is a stance that the government here in India has taken. We have to respect that stance. And I think while it's very easy for us to say sport and politics should not collide, I think when you understand what Indian cricket means to India and what Pakistan's cricket means to Pakistan, you can't say that there's not going to be a blend of, the politics and sport coming together. It is. When you see an India and Pakistan match happen, the top brass of Indian politics and Pakistan politics are there for a certain reason. It brings the nations together, but it's also a stand that is taken to also sort of showcase where we stand politically. So, I think it is a lot more to do with the political scenario of both nations. And like I said, it is ultimately a call that none of us can truly understand or say is a right or wrong call, because I think the implications of it are far greater than just a sporting match. And while the result of it might be inevitable or might sort of go one way, I think it's actually the fact that this entity happens, this grand extravaganza of an India Pakistan match, and everything that surrounds it carries so much weightage politically and not just around the sporting entity, that we have to respect that there's a lot more that goes on.
Yeah, well, no, you're right in that regard there, Sahel. Last time we spoke, we had a good old chat about India and what happened after the Australia Test series and the big 10-point guideline review that they've now brought in, for example. Have things improved now?
You do remember what I said, right? India goes out and wins a Champions Trophy, all will be forgotten. So right now things are looking pretty rosy, Natalie. I mean, two wins from two really good wins from two. Rohit Sharma back in amongst the runs. Virat Kohli with 100, and suddenly all the form of Virat and everything else is forgotten, and he comes back to being an absolute master of a white ball chase, and then he goes and does it against Pakistan of all sides. And life is very, very different one game later. And this is why we say it in sport, right? You're only as good as your last innings or your last race or your last match in whatever form that is. And I think we have to remember that sporting fans, as I said in the last episode as well, particularly from India, can be pretty fickle minded, and that works both ways. The short memory span helps when you come out and come out all guns firing without a Jasprit Bumrah. I also talked about why Mohammad Shami is so critical to Indian cricket, and I think him back in the fold gives you that semblance of balance within that team. Just gives you a proper new ball bowler in the absence of Jasprit Bumrah. So suddenly, there's no thought about the 10-point bulletin. There's no thought about the wives and girlfriends and everything else. And suddenly now all is well with Indian cricket again. So look, I think it was always going to be inevitable.
Yeah.
If India was to go out and have a good Champions Trophy with an IPL to come on the back of it, where it's just an absolute sporting extravaganza and you don't need to back your country, but suddenly you're backing a Chennai Super Kings or a Mumbai Indians, people forget about the 10-point bulletin, because each franchise comes with a separate, 10 points that they need to adhere to as well. So, yeah, the summer of cricket has truly begun for India.
I was going to say, and all that talk about Sharma and Kohli have to retire. No, 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 they don't. They're doing all right. They're
They're
working.
doing
They're
okay.
working their way, their magic as they do.